Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm so happy to see you, and we're going to talk about my thoughts regarding Spider-Man Far From Home and what it means for the future of the MCU, if we learn anything new at all in the latest GotBot Goes to the Movies. Hey lads and lasses, and it's been a while since we've done a GotBot Goes to the Movies, but I thought it was fitting to do so now. I am, of course, Dennis Moulton, aka GotBot, and I appreciate you dropping by. Please, like, comment, share, of course, subscribe, and while you're at it, that's right, hit the notification bell. It lets you know when I have new content going up, whether it be reviews or stop motions or countdowns or anything else. Check out Machinery of Man, The Everything Factor, Transformers, Collectors, NL, and me everywhere. So, Spider-Man Far From Home happened, and I'm going to kind of give a very, basic overview that's spoiler-free first, and then we'll get into the spoilers. So, first things first. So my spoiler-free reaction is this. It's a great movie. It's a fun movie. It is definitely more lighthearted than a lot of the other Marvel movies, while still maintaining a serious tone when it needs to. It has a lot of comedy. It definitely has some drama. It has some kind of coming-of-age story elements. And, of course, it has a lot of action with, like, big special effects and whatnot, as you would expect. I will say this. It did a whole lot of character development for several characters, not the least of which is Peter Parker. And it really done justice to the character of Mysterio in a very interesting way. It's definitely worth seeing. It's definitely a fun time at the theater, and I don't think, if you're a fan of other Marvel films, I don't think that this one is going to be any sort of a disappointment to you. It has great music. It has, I guess, a lot of fun elements. And it has a well-weaved story. Okay, so let's get into the nuts and bolts of things. There's things I like, things I didn't like. You know, it is what it is. Very first thing I want to address is the music. The music was generally good. I mean, it was fitting. It was heroic, but, like, not necessarily overly heroic. Like, it's weird. It's almost like the music was trying to find itself, just like Peter is trying to find himself. And while it sounded heroic, it didn't sound like it was completely mature, if that makes sense. For example, let me give you an instance of where I thought the music was absolutely top-notch and I thought perfect. Like, I thought the score was perfect here. At one point, we have Happy and Peter on the plane that Happy has, and in the back there's this whole, like, advanced room where Peter's able to go back and you know, do the whole Iron Man thing and pick out parts of his suit that he wants and blah blah blah, all this stuff. And it's very Tony Starkish the way he's acting, and we get a part of the score that is just a hint of the Avengers theme. And it's enough that you know it's the Avengers theme, but then it kind of goes off into its own sort of thing. But it's just enough for you to kind of realize that, you know, this is Avengers-ish. Peter is acting like Tony, and it makes sense. But then the music goes off in its own thing because Peter is his own thing, still trying to find himself. The music was trying to find itself. I thought that it was extremely fitting. Oddly, nowhere was there a... what's the word I'm looking for here? Like traditional Spider-Man theme. A lot of the music was cinematic. It would have been nice to kind of hear something a little more contemporary, maybe, especially where we have generally a young cast. But I can forgive it. It was fitting for what it was, and the like orchestral sort of like over-the-top cinematic. Heroic type of theme. It certainly fit during the action sequences and whatnot. What about the characters? I mentioned that it's generally a young cast. I like Tom Holland as Peter. I like Ned. He is, you know, your goofy sidekick. He's definitely comic relief. But see, here's where things get interesting, because then we have MJ, who is dark. She can be funny at times. It's definitely a different take on the traditional MJ that we know from the comics, but like, I'm cool with it. I'm all right with it. Her humor is a little more dark when it comes up. Then we have Betty Brant introduced, who is, again, like, her interactions with Ned are humorous. We have the two teachers. One of them, the guy with the beard in particular, is a goofball. Humorous again. Flash, humorous again. Here's the thing. Everybody outside of, you know, Spider-Man and I guess like Mysterio and sort of the people with Mysterio are, a lot of them are just comic relief. Like, there's good character development, but it's done in a comedic fashion. And while I thought it was good, about an hour into the movie or so, I was getting to a point where I was just thinking to myself, okay, I think there's been a little bit too much Peter and his friends gallivanting around Europe on their high school trip, and not enough kind of, you know, action and development that way. But as the second half of the movie played out, I thought to myself, you know what? Maybe if they're using this as sort of a basis and a footing going forward with the MCU, maybe, just maybe, it's all right that we're getting this character development. We saw Nick Fury and Hill again. We saw Fury and Hill again. And, like, they seemed a little more stifled. I just at first chalked it up to the fact that they were coming back from what they were calling the blip. But then, of course, we find out later on in one of the end credit scenes that that's not the case. Here's one thing I did miss in the film, and maybe a lot of people like didn't notice it so much because there was a lot of comedic elements. I missed that there was no Stan Lee scene. Not that I saw. Not to say it wasn't in there, but if it was, I didn't see it. I missed it, and that is unfortunate. I am glad that, you know, at the beginning, they did do this, like, in memoriam thing, and they showed, you know, Iron Man, and they showed Captain America, and they showed Vision, and so on and so forth. And I thought that that was, like, funny, but at the same time, touching, if you will. I thought the characterization was done well. It's just, maybe it was teetering on too much comedy. Maybe. That's arguable. I still enjoyed it. It didn't ruin it for me, but I was just beginning to hint on maybe we're getting a little too goofy here. What about the story itself? I thought that the story was very well written, very well done. When I first heard about this, I said, okay, it's going to be somewhat typical in that I believe we're going to get Mysterio seem like a hero, but it's going to turn out that, you know what, all of that was a lie. It was all a manipulation and a vision created and weaved by him, and really he's evil. And then I had heard, well, they're going to do the whole multiverse thing, and I was like, well, maybe he is from a different multiverse, a different universe. Maybe he is a hero there. Maybe. But when we got to, say, the end of the first hour or so of the film, and the elementals were finally defeated, I was like, there's still a lot left. Okay, he's going to do a turn. And sure enough, he did do a turn. And I was like, yes, because Mysterio is a bad guy. He should be a bad guy. And they made him a big deal. He was cast so well with Jake Gyllenhaal. I thought that that was excellent. He'd done such a terrific job. Here's the thing. There's a lot tied to that character, a lot more significance than I think a lot of people initially noticed. If you were around when I talked about Endgame and talked about how time travel worked and talked about, hey, going forward they may set up a multiverse, or it could be that all of these time streams converge into one prime time stream, it'll be interesting to see what they do in Phase 4. A lot of that is sort of addressed here. You see, early on in the film, in the storytelling, they set up a multiverse, and they say that this is Earth, whatever it was, 600, blah, blah, blah. And they say Mysterio's from Earth 800, blah, 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 in the multiverse. And they set that up, and it's so cool. And it's like, oh, a lot of possibilities. Maybe Iron Man is alive somewhere. And I've touched on this before. And it set up, you know, that maybe, just maybe, Mysterio is a good guy. And I thought all that was great, all that was cool, wonderful. And then when Mysterio does the turn, we find out first that there's no multiverse. There's nothing. People are gullible and believed it. There's no multiverse. Iron Man is dead. You know, the heroes that are gone are gone. It is what it is. Now, not to say there is no multiverse, but it looks like right now, at least, they've sort of torn that idea asunder, and there is one, indeed, prime timeline that we're following. And I thought that kind of tearing that whole idea asunder was a bad guy move, because a lot of us as fans wanted to believe that there was going to be a multiverse thing. Wanted to believe that somehow they're going to bring, you know, like Tony back through some sort of a portal from a different world, and we'll see him again. And Mysterio sort of tore that away from us fans. And then we find out his reasoning behind it, and how much he did, you know, had disdain for Tony, and all of these other employees had such disdain for Tony. And you get to a point where it's fun to dislike Mysterio. That's the thing. That's the key. It's like if you're a fan of wrestling. The best heels, the best bad guys are the ones that are fun to watch as bad guys. The ones that are fun to dislike. And Mysterio is fun to dislike, and I think a lot of that goes on Jake Gyllenhaal's portrayal. He done such a great job. And then the special effects. Well, we'll get into that in a second, but they really matched the character as well. Speaking of which, let's dive into the special effects. The special effects kind of give us another spoiler, so to speak, because the very first kind of set of major special effects were the elementals, and a lot of people have guessed that in Phase 4 the elementals were going to kind of be a huge part of it going forward, maybe the big baddies this time or something. And again, Mysterio uses a lie and a vision of the elementals set up with his projectors and sort of tears that idea away from fans. He tears down the idea of a multiverse. He tears away the idea of the elementals. He tears down Tony Stark. And all of a sudden, we realize that Mysterio is a bad guy. He is destroying a lot of things that us as fans who thought that we knew what was going to happen going forward in Phase 4, he's taking a lot of it and tearing it asunder. I think he's a more major villain than a lot of people gave credit for, because he's taking a lot of these theories and hopes that us as fans have had for kind of the MCU as a whole going forward, and he tears it all asunder. What a bad guy move. But because he uses the projectors, which is a very Mysterio thing to do, they're able to go very in-depth and deep with a lot of kind of CG stuff, where I think in other movies a lot of people would say, hey, they relied too much on CG. But because the bad guy here was Mysterio, I think the reliance on CG was brilliant. It was perfect. I thought that the elementals were there. I fell into believing that, you know, maybe this Mysterio is a good guy. And then when it came out that he was using these drones, these weaponized drones and their projectors, it was like, oh my goodness, this is brilliant. And we even had foreshadowing earlier on when Peter ordered the drone strike. We should have put together then that Mysterio was able to use drones. By the way, I really don't like those glasses Peter got. They don't match him. They look very Tony Starkish. And they even matched Mysterio. They did not match Tom Holland at all. They looked awful. But I thought that was so well done. And then when Peter is doing combat with Mysterio, the way that the landscape and the environment and all of the images stuff keep changing was so Mysterio. And the fact that Peter had to see past all that, rely on his spider sense, or his Peter tingle, if you will, rely on that to be able to get close enough to actually beat and best Mysterio. Again, I thought that was brilliant. It all had to do with him becoming a more mature hero, with him possibly taking up the mantle of leadership left by Iron Man. I think that's what they're angling for. I don't know if that's what's going to happen, because we still have a lot of heroes to come. I mean, we still have like a new Cap out there somewhere, you know. We still have another Guardians movie coming up. There's still a lot of stuff going forward that I kind of can't wait to see who takes up the mantle. And I think that setting Peter up as a possible, new leader for the Avengers, it's only going to be one possible new leader that they're going to set up. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Why people thought that he was going to automatically be the next Tony Stark? I don't know. I don't know if I missed something or if there's something in between that we as the moviegoer aren't supposed to know yet, or if it's just because he was wearing like an Iron Spider type of suit and people just sort of put two and two together with Iron Man gone. I don't know. That's one part of the storytelling that did bother me. But other than that, I thought that it was done well. Maybe early on a little over-reliance on the comedy, but otherwise I thought it was done really well. Then that brings us to the action. The action was tremendous, but it ties in with the CG. It was done, again, so very, very well, and the CG that was done was at a very high level. It was nothing... When I talked about Captain Marvel, I said that I felt like some of the CG there was sort of obviously CG. I didn't get that feeling with Spider-Man. I thought they stepped it up just a little bit more here, and I really appreciate that because it made the realism behind the action seem really, really good. Now, that being said, there's a couple of sequences that I almost feel like they tried to go into too much explanation too. Like, there's one where Mysterio is planning something out and the drones are doing their thing and he's like, amp up the damage, 2 times or something like that. And I was like, this is almost too much choreography for this action sequence that Mysterio plans on doing. Now, I know what he was doing. He was planning that big scene in London. But, like, I don't know. Almost seeing him plan it took something away from it. So I'm glad that when that big scene came up in London, they didn't spend too long with that huge elemental in Mysterio before they had Peter kind of, go into the illusion and kind of have his battle with Mysterio. Like, I'm glad they didn't have the super elemental and Mysterio battle too long before Spider-Man and Mysterio did battle. Then we get to the end scene credits. And there were 2 in this one. Let's talk about each. The first one is the one that relates to the character of Spider-Man. And I like that it was actually a huge throwback to the first Spider-Man trilogy, the Tobey Maguire trilogy, because we had that whole swinging of Spider-Man carrying MJ, and that the way the filming was done there was very much like from the original trilogy. And then when we saw the kind of doctored video in the news broadcast, I was like, you know what? Even from Beyond the Grave, Mysterio is still winning and still manipulating things. As well, we know that William, I think is the guy's name, seems to have downloaded all of them, like, information and whatnot having to do with Mysterio. So I think that while Jake Gyllenhaal, Beck, is, obviously passed away, I don't think we've seen the end of the character of Mysterio. I think he will come back again. Nevertheless, we saw the doctored video and Jake Gyllenhaal making Spider-Man look bad and then pointing out who he is, being Peter Parker. And some people have complained and said that's going too over the top. But I felt like him having his secret identity revealed at the end was very much like Tony revealing that he was Iron Man at the end of the first film. And then to top it all off, we get old JJJ. And who else could play J. Jonah Jameson? Nobody. It is I don't know the actor's name. A lot of people do. I'm sure you're yelling at me now. But it is the same guy who played him in the Tobey Maguire trilogy. And you know what? He recently played Commissioner Gordon. And I didn't like him as Commissioner Gordon. He's J. Jonah Jameson. And I thought I was so glad to see him recast as J. Jonah Jameson. That being said, I think it's very interesting that he was recast as J. Jonah Jameson because it makes me wonder going forward. Now that we have had new franchises, we'll say, be reacquired into the MCU, like the X-Men and the Fantastic Four, for example, could we see familiar faces be recast in those same roles going forward? I can't wait to see kind of how that stuff plays out. Then we get to the very end scene. And we get the explanation why Hill and Fury were kind of acting weird because they were Skrulls. It was Talos and his wife. And, alright, fine. I don't really get Like, is everybody going to be a Skrull? Is that it going forward? I don't know, but there is a theory that says that a lot of the characters that we think are gone and whatnot are Skrull imposters. So it opens that possibility, you know? Like, I heard a far-fetched theory, hope, I think it's more hope than anything, that, you know, maybe the Tony that we saw pass away was actually a Skrull imposter, and that the real Tony has been underground somewhere. I wouldn't hold my breath for it, but I guess the possibility is there. Then we see the real Nick get it from apparently tanning himself, and he's aboard a huge ship. I think it's the Skrull ship, I believe. And he wants his shoes, which makes us think, hey, whatever the next big threat is going to be, it's going to possibly be still intergalactic, I suppose. And I've even heard the theory thrown out that maybe Fury is now the head of S.W.O.R.D. We'll see. I think it's called S.W.O.R.D. We'll see. I don't know. I still feel like we haven't seen any sort of hint to what's exactly to come, other than it's probably still in space, which I think sort of still brings me back to my potential theory that maybe going forward we'll see Celestials or we may see Galactus, which I think would be quite the threat in and of himself. So, all of that being said, I think it was a great movie. Overall, I think it was another absolute win all ways around. What didn't I like about it? I didn't like the excessive use of comedy necessarily. A few of the jokes could have been taken out. Keep the comedy that was there, but maybe 4 or 5 of the jokes were a little bit too much, could have been taken out. Outside of that, don't think there was really anything that I didn't like. I think that I liked pretty much everything. So what does this tell us about the MCU going forward? Well, here's what it sort of does tell us. That the idea of a multiverse right now is probably shot down. We're dealing with one prime timeline, and everything that happened in Endgame sort of reconverged into that prime timeline. It tells us that the elementals might not be a significant thing going forward. We've sort of already dealt with them. Or maybe it's a red herring and they will be a significant thing going forward. But right now it looks like they probably won't be. They were just a tool to be manipulated and used by Mysterio. We'll see. We'll see how that pans out. Either it's foreshadowing of what's to come, or it's a message to us as fans that these things aren't happening. Nice try, nice guess, guys, but you were completely wrong. Guess we'll see as we go forward. And I think that it's setting up right now that there's a void and a vacuum in the leadership of the heroes with Iron Man gone. And Peter is one potential candidate for somebody who might be able to fill that void going forward. It'll be interesting to see what kind of new Avengers join with him as we branch out and kind of go into the next phase. Overall, I absolutely say go see this in theater, see it with your friends, see it with your family. I think you're going to have a good time. Anyway, that's it for me. I'm going to get out of here, and I appreciate you dropping by, giving me some of your very valuable time. There's a donate link down in the description if you're in a position to help the channel, and I very much look forward to the next time that you and I get together to have a visit, either in the live streams or right here inside the videos.